Hi, everybody. I'm Larry LeBeau. As Nicole and Allison mentioned, I've been on the board since almost the beginning of BRIC, and this summit has grown and done amazing things every year. So excited to be here with a glass of wine in hand. I would say, since this is the last discussion of the day, like get up and stretch, but don't because you're going to have wine very soon. Um, so this is a cheers to two incredible senior leaders who have been champions for underrepresented groups for DEI in our industry for a long time, who I've had the pleasure of working with. They need no introduction. I think everybody here knows who they are. And with that, I would love to introduce Jeanell English and Karen Horne, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, are we?
Oh wait, it's on.
It's on now? Okay.
It's on.
We're
Hi
good.
everyone. Cheers.
Hi.
Cheers, Jeanell.
Cheers. Yes.
We
I-
said
yes.
to them that if we had wine, this will be a lot more interesting. And they were like, "What
Oh,
kind do you
yes.
like? We're gonna get you a bottle." So, cheers.
It will get more interesting. Yes. And we also will keep this really casual, y'all, because I think for anyone who knows Karen or myself, that's the way we move, right? I think to model access, to model inclusion is to just show up authentically as you are. And I'm really proud to have seen Karen in action and know that to be true. So, literally, any questions, y'all? Like, just
We'll
throw them
get
out
there,
there.
but first,
Yeah.
like, how you been? Anything new happened to you last year in July?
Anything new? Anything new? And this is interesting because I think last summer, Karen and I were both a meme. And I have never been on Black Twitter before. And I literally have family like, yo, I'm defending you. I'm like, defending me where? What are you talking about? And they're like, yeah, your face is all over Twitter. And I was like, for what? For quitting my job? Oh, that is new.
I had family that a week before that happened, were calling me to ask me for money, and then a week afterwards was calling me to ask me if I'm okay. And I had someone to say, and my vain ass was like, "Oh my God, I just bought that dress. I can never wear it again." Like, and then my friend said, "Oh, it's on TikTok," and I'm like, "Well, at least she's standing in front of me," and I'm like, "Oh shit, she moved." Like, it is one thing to be restructured is the word they said out of your job, but to do it virally is a whole different thing. But I will say to you that I personally, and I know this is the same and duly deserved, Jeanell, for you as well. It was really heartwarming on several reasons. First of all, because we found out that the industry really cares about the work we're doing and knows the necessity of it. And also, you don't often get to see the impact you make while you're still able to really kind of receive it. And so I am thankful that I got a chance to have it that way. And the universe gives you what you need. And I had an amazing team at Warner Brothers Discovery. Some of them are here right now, and so I wish them all success.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's weird, especially coming off of an Oscars week. And I think for me, the greatest reflection that I had was, oh shit, you had an impact. Like the things that you introduced, as hard as they might have been to get them done, they are being sustained. And I think that's a really important message for all of us right now because things are changing a lot in this industry, right? But when you are doing the work of a diversity practitioner, when you're prioritizing equity and inclusion, your job is to plant seeds, to start to initiate the work, not necessarily to be there forever to see it through. That can't sit on one person, right? But I think and I know for both of us, we're incredibly proud of some of the seeds that we've planted. I mean, Karen, what about you? Like when you look back at your career, are there things that you're sitting here like, oh, this is
Yeah.
still.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, in success, what we do is we change mindsets. We don't just change, like, I don't have the ability to hire a writer on a show or I don't have the ability to hire a VP in development. The person that they report to hires them. But what I can do is help change the mindset of the people who often say no to hiring people who don't look like them. And that's the really important thing that we try to do. And, I have been blessed enough to have had some, support in my career, with my teams and with companies that believed in this work, to change the landscape in this industry. I see Vanessa Pfeiffer sitting over there, and hi, V, who was on my team at Warner Brothers Discovery and is still there. We created a program at HBO Max, an animated shorts program, and that's Vanessa, she championed that through and through. But we partner with that business to come to us, and they were interested in doing something, and they were like, I don't think we can do that. I'm like, we can do anything. And so we did, and we created the Just for You, the Only You, right? Animated shorts program. And it was stories that only these animators could tell. And we partnered with different organizations and found animators in our team in Canada, and two of the shorts got nominated, one for an Annie Award and another for an NAACP Image Award. And we're super proud. We've changed their lives. Those people are, one of the filmmaker team is now here in Los Angeles, has representation, and will work in this industry for sure. I got to do that at NBC a lot with our late night writers workshop that we did there, and it changed the landscape of late night programming. Previously, it was just white men and writing in late night. And then we found writers who went on to create, Jokes Seth Can't Tell, and helped to create Carpool Karaoke with James Corden. And we're running, Colbert, and like just really changed that landscape. And the female forward directing program, also brought more women, and our emerging directing program brought in more men, diverse men in that space too. So we've had the opportunity, and I don't say just me because I never sit up here alone, but we had the opportunity to really change the landscape in this industry for the better. And you're seeing some of that. The guy who created what is that awful I'm blinking on it. He just won like all kinds of awards, Sonny, about road rage. What is it? Beef. Oh my
Yeah,
God. I
Beef.
kept on wanting to
Love
say
Beef.
the bear, but he was
Also a
that
great
was a
show.
B.
I'm like,
Starts
we
with a
love
B. Sounds but he was in our writing program at NBC, and and there's so many more of those stories. So I know that if you have opportunity to create path, like my old boss used to say that there's an abundance of talent, but not an abundance of opportunity. And that's what we want to change, is the pathways to have people who have talent just have doors where they've historically been excluded.
Mhm. I think, and building on that, right? When you create these programs, when you establish a pathway, there's also a big call to action to that individual to say, how are you then going to open a door for someone else? So, I think that's a big important element to all of these works. It's not just a singular program. What you're doing is creating access for one person, maybe, but that person is going to turn around and create access for two people. And again, the work continues. It's not just Karen and her incredible team. It's not just myself and the incredible teams that I've had. It's really what those who have the privilege and the opportunity then do with that opportunity.
Yeah, I know. And what I say when I say when I talk about changing mindsets, that's the important part, right? Because it's much more than a program or an initiative or something like that. In my last year at Warner Brothers, I got an opportunity to really work with our workforce and our strategy, because our companies are only made up of the people who they employ, right? So how do you create environments where you can disrupt, where you can be a disruptor, where you can come in and feel like you have the ability to challenge what is the quote unquote norm, and not get ostracized for doing it, like, or get your hands slapped for saying something is different, because it's those disruptors that make this world, that change the world, right? So what we're at, and here's what I say mostly is that the data doesn't lie. You know what I mean? Like, so we talk about the buying power of diverse audiences. the reports are there, the numbers are there. For us to leave that money on the table just doesn't make sense. And what I find often is that, and this is what I said to a friend of mine, and Jeanell and I we're just going to do panels for this. We're on a panel a couple of days ago, but I wanted to bring it up there and I forgot to. But like Wall Street, like here's a problem with Hollywood. Hollywood is boogie down. uh,
It's
that's a
unpredictable.
party.
Love it.
Party's getting ready to
Yes.
start. Hollywood often believes that because they're liberal, they vote Democrat. They put a black square on their social media when
The black square.
someone gets killed or something like that. That they're woke, right? But Wall Street has had diverse people run $1 billion funds for decades. For decades. There is probably one person, Bella, at Netflix, who has green light ability in this entire industry. So what that tells me is that they don't mind if you control the money, but they don't want you to control the narrative because the narrative is what changes people's minds, right? So that is what we battle. And I don't know about you, but I'm trying to tired of making people think that they're
Tired.
doing me a favor
That
by
part.
making them successful.
That part. The fatigue is real. And I love what you're saying, just even about this idea of changing, hearts and minds, I like to say.
I don't care about their hearts, honestly. Just change them.
I care about their hearts. I'm a little woo-woo, y'all. Like literally, this is yeah, on brand with me. But you're not going to change everybody, right? You're really, really not. And so a big part of doing this work is also playing a little bit of chess. Who can you influence enough to be able to get those narratives out there that have the ability to impact and evolve a larger group of individuals? And that work is hard. That work is quite honestly exhausting. My career has been very eclectic and different, y'all. Like I have dipped in and out of diversity positions intentionally. I started my career in diversity in a very different industry, and it was cool. It was cool. I learned a lot. I was working in the defense industry at that time. I got really good at articulating the business case, understanding the numbers, the ROI, understanding how the government can direct funding and resources. It was great, right? My interest though and my passion has always been in the arts. So when I left that world and moved into the entertainment space, working for Discovery Channel at that time, I was asked to bring some of the structure of government into this creative space. So, how are you now starting to put in place structure and policies to help ensure that our creative community is held accountable for being more inclusive? And that was an incredibly big ask. So I did that with Discovery and then moved to Europe where I was asked to build out a diversity practice in Europe, which very, very different landscape, very different conversation. And what I learned there is this work is really about observing who has access and asking the questions around why certain people, certain communities don't. And that question alone can make people really uncomfortable. So, your job, your very existence is to make people uncomfortable, which means you are often not the most loved, certainly not the most liked person in the room. Like, truly. You, as many friends as you make, you also, have people saying, "Oh, they don't understand our culture. They don't understand this. They're asking all these questions." I'm like, "No, I'm seeking to understand." Right? Because what I'm seeing, what I'm observing is this room is not set up for everyone. And it's my job now to figure out why and to really question how I can help change that. So before I decided to move back to the States and work at the academy, I honestly wasn't sure if I was going to. Like I was like, this is great. I'm over here living in Europe. Life is cute. I'm like traveling. I was in London and Paris. Um, and again, I dip in and out of diversity roles. So I left my diversity job and worked in production. So I started working in the live sports space. I was working on content covering different sport events from around Europe. And I made that move because for me, being in a diversity position gave me a unique vantage point to understand every aspect of a business. I always say diversity, inclusion, equity, accessibility, those are my values. You can't change my values. My job, I was a really great operations person. I got shit done. So I was able to take my values into a sporting world. And when I was in a sporting world, I was looking at who we're giving the opportunity to tell the stories about, how we are bringing sports to different communities to broaden our audience. I was creating avenues for communities that I identified with to leverage sport and to engage with sport as an outlet, as a connective, as a way to bridge, and have conversations. And the thing I was most proud of is in 2020, BLM happens. And, we're a European sport business. Tennis was our jam. And I remember there was this big match, and it was Naomi Osaka decided not to play. And I told our teams we're taking down all of our sport content off of all of our apps touching Europe. And they were like, this isn't a European problem. And I was like, it's a human rights issue. And our job as a media company is to start a conversation. Our job is to recognize that sports and storytelling around sports can start a necessary conversation because this experience, as someone who is not living in the US, is not solely specific to the US. And we pulled all of our content down off of all of our apps, off of the largest performing sport. It was huge. It was a huge move, right? And that's what it means to be on the inside, right? Your job is to find those avenues, those opportunities to put pressure on your business to ignite conversation. Like that's what it means to be responsible with this platform that is entertainment, that's media. Like that is what it means to be responsible with that privilege of reaching so many people.
How do you, yes.
Sorry, I'm preaching. The wine. Oh my God.
She's just starting too. How do you keep going? Because we were talking earlier, like we are of the class that we're trying to get people to embrace. And then when we get pushback, you take personally, right? So I mean, like I've done this for a long time. For me, it's just wearing rose-colored glasses, maybe a bit too much. It is having I said this the other day, audacity to believe that what we are doing is, for me, I will say, I asked you the question and I'm going to answer it for me first. So,
Answer first. Go ahead. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking. It's fine.
um, uh, for me, I recognize that content affects our culture. And I have two children. And, my son is a beautiful Black man with locks in his hair. And we look, constantly at people who look like him being killed in their own communities. And then people who don't look like him, can walk up to a police car with a smoking gun and lay in his own bed at night. And that's because not just scripted content, but news says that my son is the bad guy and the other guy isn't. And that is because that's what we feed them. That's because that's what we feed them. And it's largely because of what we feed them. And for me, the personal part of this about the necessity to do it is more so than just because it's my job. It's because I don't want to work for a company that doesn't do this mostly because of the business sense of it, but also because I really think that it matters. It matters to me personally. It matters to me for this generation coming up. It's just really important. And if we look at animation and gaming, they are the outlets that young people, most impressionable people consume mostly, right? So the having authentic content there is probably more important than primetime for me.
I mean, that's a big why. I do not have children. My child is a dog. And he actually, strangely, he reacts to police on TV. He is not a fan of the police. You can say what you will. I'm like, this is a black dog, but he does not, he does not love the police. It's a funny thing. But I think for me, what's always kept me going in doing this is I'm the child of an artist and a therapist. And I have always grown up to believe that art is the most honest representation of where humanity is at a point in time. And with that belief, it is so important to me to make sure that art is accurate. And therefore, it has to be inclusive. I mean, if we look back, right, storytelling, original art form. That's how histories were shared, how people got excited, how, communities came together. Like that is there's a lot of power in storytelling, and that's what this industry is. It's an extension of storytelling. And for me, that's been the biggest motivator. I will say though, and I'm very ruthless about my career. I always say, and I know Karen shares this, like the greatest fear of doing this work is that you become a performative diversity person, where your face is like more attractive than the work that you're doing, the ideas that you're bringing, the people you're bringing to the table, like the PR of it all, right? And for businesses, insert little black squares everywhere, that's a very real concern. It's very real. I don't do performative well, and I'm real quick to leave a job if I feel like that's where it's going. Real quick. And I always say, like, even if I've left a job, I don't stop working, because again, this is my values. This is how I was raised. This is what I believe in. So the work has to continue because I don't know how else to exist. And, there's this whole conversation, and Karen, I'm curious your observation on this. Like, there's this big war on diversity, there's this big war on DEI. I mean, it's only a war if like both sides are really fighting. I'm not really fighting. You can't fight with me on my values. Like, you can't. Like, this is just how I exist. So wherever I go, irregardless of what job title I hold, I am going to continue to do the work. And that's, I think, an opportunity for everyone in this room is, it's not about a chief diversity officer. It's not about an impact leader in an organization. It's not. It's about you and what are those additional lines that you are adding to your job description to hold yourself accountable for, again, opening doors, for being authentic in your storytelling, for being bold and fearless, because hell, like, everyone's going to get canceled at some point for some reason these days. So you might as well go out having maybe written an op-ed blasting one of the oldest institutions in this industry. It's fine, right? Like, life continues. But what is your truth? What is your narrative that you're wanting to hold on to? I mean, Karen, what are your thoughts just on this war on woke, DEI, all the things?
Um, uh, well, first of all, I think that the quote unquote backlash against it if is getting strength because people are talking about it. It's bullshit. Like, this has never been an easy job. It's never been fully embraced in my 20 some odd years of doing it. It's never been fully, it's always been a challenge to get people to accept, to participate, and to do it. So I don't think that any pushback is new. I think that the companies who are now saying that there is that they can't do as much in the space really didn't care about doing it in the first place. And so I would take a pass on working with those companies anyway, because like you, I don't have any desire to work performatively. I can't make and really affect change in a company. Then I don't want to be there just to be your poster person, for diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. I think that to your point, there are a lot of people who want to do that. I'm not one. There are a lot of people who make it more about their work. I mean, and the last two companies I worked for, they really had to, try to get me to get out there and do articles. And it was, explained. And I recognize that if we talk about our work, it makes it better for the company. And so as being a company person, I'm like, sure, I'll do it. And it helps promote the work we're doing. So I'll do it, but I don't stand in line to go to anyone's party or to be, to have my picture all over, the thing because I went to this or thing or that or thing. I'd rather just be at home on my sweats, quite honestly. But it is, but it we have to stop the conversation about there being a backlash on this because um, it's always been, a challenge. And what's going on now is really just going on, in these super red states. And it's about affirmative action in schools and stuff. And, you know, I read something today where I think it was Martin Luther King who said that if we are hundreds of years in where a country has treated black, in this case, black people poorly, we need to be that much where we don't treat them poorly. Like, and we're not there yet. We are more years enslaved than we are not. This is a country and many of our countries that were built on systemic racism. And then you look at people who think that, they're succeeding when they're not recognizing that the tide has really been built for them, and hasn't been built, for the people who haven't had the privilege or opportunities. So in saying that to people, you have to code it in a way that doesn't offend them or make them uncomfortable. Because if you do, then what you're not going to get buy-in. You're not going to get success. They're going to get defensive. They're going to be like, but I voted for Joe Biden, even if whatever. Like I voted for Barack Obama twice. They're not going to really fully embrace that this is not just good for your stories. It's good for our bottom line, for our business, and that there's enough. Here's the thing. There's enough to go around. Please, there's enough to go around. It doesn't matter, open the door. Like you were saying earlier, if you're in a position to help someone and you don't, then that's just not cool.
Not cool at all. I support that. I'm like, yeah. I love that, Karen. And I think, before we open it up to y'all, like if there's any thoughts that you want to share too, because this is a conversation for us all. I think it's important to, again, remember things are cyclical. So as dark and wild and crazy and weird as things feel, like keep going, keep creating, because when you create, you are flooding this creative economy with really beautiful and necessary stories. And those stories are always going to find an audience, especially now, regardless of what happens with TikTok. There's always an avenue to
Wait,
share
there's
your
a
work.
new app we learned about the other day, right?
Yes, there is. Spill.
Spill. Who
Spill.
knows about Spill? Anybody know about Spill? We're the black people in the room. No?
Yeah.
You know about, see? I
I
told
didn't
you.
know about Spill. I found out the other
I
day.
found out about it the other day. Anyway.
Yes, founded by ex-Twitter employees, post Elon Musk. Give it a whirl. We're gonna help promote that
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
It's actually a very cool platform. I downloaded it yesterday. I
Oh,
did.
okay.
I did. Yes. So I mean, there's always going to be avenues to put your work out there, and I just encourage you all to continue to share.
I would add to that too is that and this is what I say. I've worked in talent development and it has filled me up. I would say to people that they would often ask me like, how do you deal with it? Like, how do you, and I'm like, when I get a writer staff on a show, when I get a director, an episode or an actor or part, it is such a fucking high for me. Like it makes all the other bullshit that you have to deal with a little bit more palatable. It is so like it's me saying, yeah, I was right. They're good. You know what I mean? Like it's for me. But I would say hone your crafts. Like it doesn't matter. To that same breath, I would say to people, it doesn't matter if you check every proverbial box. If you're not talented, you're going to do me a disservice. I'm not going to be able to promote you, right? So I would say to all the creators in here, like hone your craft. And if the executives are in here, be know the world, like be the best executive. You know, I always had to know all the non-diverse talent and then all the diverse talent. And I'm finally getting to a point where like my friends are like they're calling me. I would get this from like every place in the industry. Hey, do you know a writer who is Latina and a lawyer and can ride horses? And I'm like, yeah.
I actually do.
Yeah, yeah, I got someone right here. Yeah, go check her out. Yeah, but now I'm getting to the point where I'm like, yeah, I don't know that anymore. Sorry, call somebody else. Like I'm just like which is kind of freeing. But I would say make sure you hone your crafts, be the best, no matter what you do, and also don't wait for people to give you permission to do your passions. There are, as Jeanell said, there are places that you can put your work, and if it's good, it's going to be found, it'll be seen, and ultimately, you know, people will. We were talking about this just the other day. There are people. It'll get found. We have to work to where we own our IP and we can distribute it, and we're not there yet. See previous conversation about not having the ability to greenlight something, but be fucking great at what you do, and your success will find you for sure.
Amen on that. Own your shit, right? And
Mhm.
if you don't know how, there are people, you can talk to us too about how and what that looks like. It's when I left the academy, I started my consulting practice, but really at the heart of that, I have a publishing company, independent publishing company. And what I'm really looking to do is facilitate more IP ownership amongst communities who have been unfortunately on the margins of this industry for too long. So how do I not only champion your story and get it into the world, but how do I make sure you own it? Because it's not enough anymore to be the person in the room with a good idea. If you own that idea, then you have a lot of power. So with that, shall we, are any questions, comments, other contributions? Because again, y'all, this is a community space. Yeah.
I also just happen to have a microphone here.
Oh, I was like, wow,
Oh.
she was ready.
Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Thank you.
She has one, yeah.
From when I talked earlier. First off, thank you both for coming today. I've followed your careers very intensely. So my name is Shaniqua. I just transitioned to DBIE last July, coming from social impact and CSR. I started July 11th, so that week, yeah, it was great.
I'm
It
so
was
sorry.
it's okay. My boss is great. I work at Participant. It's a great company.
Oh, love participant.
Yes.
Yeah. Mhm.
My question is, being in the entertainment and media industry for now almost 2 years, how do you define your self-care? Because being a DBIE, you're supporting other people all the time. You're trying to give spaces to other people, but I find that it's not really coming back to me for that. So I would love to hear how you self-care if it's not too personal.
No, I'll go first because you'll talk about your book after, right? Um, I had to learn that, and I'm still learning it even now where I don't technically have a job. I sit on 5 boards, and my family are like, why are you so busy? You're supposed to be relaxing. Like, what the hell? I'm like, "Oh, I have a 9 o'clock meeting." Like, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't want to do any 9 o'clock meetings because I don't have to. They're not paying me to do them. But the balance is real. What I've learned, I haven't gotten it yet. Any artists in here want to draw me an amazing lighthouse to tattoo myself? It's going to be my first tattoo that I get, because the philosophy of a lighthouse is that unless you keep your own light on, you can't be of service to other people. And being, an executive, a mom, I have a dog too, and all of that stuff. It is you're usually the last person to do that. So now what I have learned to do is to just say no a little bit. To like I love a staycation, I will get a amazing hotel room somewhere and just be on the weekends, or now I could do it during the week, by myself. Do a little, you make sure I'm exercising because it really does help your mind as well as your body. And try to just not take it personally, which is super, super hard, as we talked about before. you are of the class that you're trying to promote or protect, and you're often, you take it personally. So it's a hard balance, but it's super, super important. And I will say that I'm always better with my teams. I always tell them, take care of yourselves but then my teams have told me, you need to do that because we mirror you. And if you're not doing it, then we don't feel that we can't do it either. And that has been the biggest help for me and lesson for me. Yes.
I just want to say something as somebody who worked for Karen Horne and who is the best boss I've ever had in my whole life. One of the things that Karen also did is that she created a culture of joy for her team, in a way that, like, yeah, the work is super hard and it can be like you can feel like broken at the end of the day, but if you have an amazing boss who's creating this environment that lifts you up like every single day. And Karen did that even when I knew things were super hard. We all go through all kinds of challenges, but Karen is just such an incredible light. She's the lighthouse. And yeah, I just want to say that.
I swear I didn't plant her here.
That's beautiful. I was like, where's my team? Bettina was here earlier. She had an emergency. I'm like, Bettina, come back. No.
Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa.
Beautiful.
I appreciate that. Thank
I
you.
think self-care, especially in doing DIB work, is really hard. I consistently have burned out in my career because when you are doing work in service for so many and you realize what you've done today is not enough, it's really, really hard to sleep. I will say wine helps. We're in California. Weed also helps. But I'm not advocating, by the way, but it can help. But I have really struggled with that, to be honest. And I love even just Karen, you getting your flowers, because oftentimes when you're leading these teams, a big part of your job is being that light. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh, good, my team feels good. You turn off your Zooms, you go home, and you're like, I am depleted. I'm wholly depleted. And the biggest lesson that I have learned in this new season is to create boundaries. And I think the first way you can do that is be very clear about what your job is and what it isn't. I think oftentimes the burnout in these jobs comes from, the urgency and the expectancy of the communities that you're advocating for, and you see them and you're like, yes, I'm with you. Like, I see you, I care so much. We got to do more, right? Those expectations are a lot. You're never doing enough. It's not fast enough. It's not deep enough. It's not far enough. And then you're in the rooms where you're advocating for really your own community in a lot of ways, and the resistance or the commentary, like, ooh, that takes a toll. You're like, wait, you do realize, like, who you're talking to when you're sharing this feedback, right? It takes a toll. So I had to get really good, especially later in my career, saying, here's what my job is and here's what it isn't. And I think a lot of times, especially post 2020, when there was just a huge uplift of all these diversity roles, there was confusion around what these jobs actually were. And there was disappointment from the communities who you were advocating for, like, but you haven't done this for me. And similarly, you had exhaustion fighting when, the people you were fighting for and what you were up against, you were hearing, oh, we can't do that. And it all came from a place of fear. Like, ultimately, it's fear. Fear creates an impasse and prevents progress every single day. So be very bold and fearless in saying, this is my job and this is what it's not. I own that.
What's the book you talk about all the
Oh
time?
my God. Okay. And then this part, like, y'all, I read a lot, hence publishing and all the things. But I was introduced to a book this summer called Rest is Resistance. It's written by Trisha Hersey. I've gifted it a million times over. But really, the biggest takeaway from this is that when you are not rested, and capitalism doesn't allow us to rest, y'all, And that's by design. But when you are not rested, you cannot be your brightest, most creative self. You can't. You're operating at half capacity. And that's not effective. That's not efficient. And rest doesn't necessarily mean a nap. It means what are those things, those places that inspire you. I mentioned I'm the daughter of an artist. I grew up with like making photo prints in a dark room in our house and pottery and painting and all the things. And I studied fine arts in college, and I used to paint a lot. The past 5 years, I haven't painted a single thing. I lost that desire to create. I forgot, to give myself that way to express. And we're all meant to create something in some capacity.
Is
So
that what you do when
Yes.
you for like? I have a friend who's an artist as
Yeah.
well, and he says that painting is active meditation to him.
Mhm.
And for me, cooking is that. It's also
Ooh,
it's my
I
love
love that.
language. I like to cook. I like to eat.
When
Like,
are we having dinner?
yeah, come on up, girl.
Inviting myself over.
You should.
Done.
But I also like, also like getting on my bike
Yes.
is like I know when I'm trying to, do the RPMs or whatever like that, I don't think about bullshit for a minute. And and also now that I don't have to get up, to do 7 o'clock meetings because my boss is in the UK, I can sleep in and, I'm ready for the resistance because
Hell
I'm
yeah.
resting, so I'm ready for the resistance.
Yeah.
Anybody else have questions? Hi.
First of all, thank you both so much for being here. I think all of us really, really appreciate your insight and expertise and everything that you bring. So this is kind of a long-winded question. I'm going to apologize in advance. I work at a studio. I don't do DEIA work directly, but I bring my values and my morals to work every day, and it's rooted in all of the work that I do and what I encourage my team to do. Our work sits at the cross section of art, commerce, consumer behavior, culture, and what I think our role really is to try to encourage all the partners that we work with to greenlight content that is reflective of the environment in which it needs to succeed. If the content doesn't look like the people who are ultimately going to watch it, it's not going to work. It's not going to make money. And what I've often found is that because all of the entities that are responsible for the creation, marketing, and distribution of art, because that's what this all is, those entities are all publicly traded. And so we live and die by every single quarterly earnings report instead of what needs to actually happen longer term for us to build out processes, infrastructure, whatever it may be, so that everything that we're trying to establish can happen naturally, organically in a long-term capacity. I've started to ask executives, what do you think, because there's just so much merger and acquisition chatter that's happening, what do you think would happen if we were private instead of publicly traded? I'm curious if the two of you in your conversations at all the places that you've been, the conversations that you've had with either the C-suite or adjacent, have you broached that subject of, can we go private instead of being in the financial status that we are in? Can we go from being publicly traded to private and make decisions not quarterly earnings report to quarterly earnings report, but really create a long-term roadmap for profitability?
Well, I've only worked for really big companies. So and I would I haven't had enough wine to be honest.
Pop up perhaps?
um I'd be afraid if some of the people who are in positions of leadership were able to take the companies private. I just would, because I would say that those are white guys. Those are old white guys. And as it is now, I'm having, we've had a hard time of saying to them, this is why you should do, I mean, Disney had to be convinced to let Ryan Coogler do Black Panther, you know. And once they got on board, they got on board. And wow, what a success it was, So um, I would, without accountability of a publicly traded company where they know they have to stand in front of their shareholders and be responsible for the work that they do, to a board that, has to answer to those shareholders as well. I, I wish I had more faith in saying that it would be great, they would think about long term, but maybe it would be greater for some of the smaller companies, but the bigger companies, I'm not sure that it would re- give the results that we'd hope that they would give. Go ahead, you have a.
I was just gonna say, if I can double click on that point of accountability, year over year, movie over movie, project over project, it's the material that is representative,
Yeah,
that
that's
is more
performance.
inclusive, that actually generates the most revenue.
Absolutely.
And you would think we
And
would
yet we
be
revert
putting
back
ourselves out of
anyway.
work, right?
So,
Because
so where is the accountability coming from? Because all those companies are publicly traded, and yet no analysts ask the CEOs, why are you continuing to greenlight more projects that make less profit?
Who holds the majority of the shares? That's what it comes down to. When I talked about IP ownership, but let's talk about ownership, period. I don't think going public to private is necessarily the solution, right? But what I will say, even in reflecting on my own family and conversations that we have, no one's ever talked about investing. No one actually understands what it means to be a shareholder in a business. Or maybe if you somehow got attached to some mutual fund and you get some emails, are you reading those emails? Are you showing up to the meetings? So I do think there is a really critical conversation that needs to be had in the communities that do represent the global majorities to actually show up within these publicly traded companies and understand what it means to do so. That's the only way I think the accountability will start to shift, is when that ownership does start to shift to really reflect the majorities, because right now it's owned and operated by a select few, and that's part of the problem.
and to your point, it just makes no sense, right? It just really, the data is there to say, take, like Cord Jefferson said at the Oscars, like $200 million movies are a risk. So what if you gave $10 million to 20 people and let them do movies that didn't look like, the movies that you've used to greenlighting? Like, what if? I mean, I did an initiative at Warner Brothers, or started it before I left, and it was based on our 100th anniversary. And they asked me, what could we do to do that? And I was like, what if we took some Warner Brothers IP and gave it to six filmmakers, six or five, six filmmakers, and let them reimagine these titles through their bespoke lens, right? I mean, I did that because Disney has this program. I'm looking at Kathy, has this program that I like just really love. It's their, what's the film program called? Launchpad. And I was like, we need to do something in film. And I thought it would give opportunities for these filmmakers to have, like, it's nothing to give them an opportunity to do. And we know that diverse films make money. Like, they would like you to believe that they don't. They would like you to believe that they don't travel well overseas, but we know the data is there to say differently. So your question is, like, to mine, what I said earlier, the narrative just doesn't make sense. And it's because, control.
It's the only thing I'll add to that. It's interesting, right? Sitting at an institution like an academy, which is comprised of literally like the folks who own a lot of these companies, whether or not they're running them, they have an ownership in them. Um, the conversation again, this goes back to fear. Like, people are really scared that you give an opportunity, it's taking away from me, from my creative control, from my currency in this industry. Like, there's fear. And that's literally the underlying issue. And the only way to combat fear is with courage. So that's where I'm sitting here like, okay, y'all, like, keep going, keep creating, flood that creative economy to the point where it can't even be a question, a debate, a conversation. This isn't about diversity. It has nothing to do with that. It's like, this is the arts. It's an investment in the arts, and public versus private. And again, I've worked in a lot of different countries at this point, and these conversations come up. In my mind, like, I actually prefer the more public route, because I think art should be shared and it should be collective. But we are not approaching that conversation in the right way in the US in terms of who is really controlling and holding those organizations accountable. I mean, if you have one share of Disney, you can go to a shareholders meeting. You can raise a question. Like, how many of us have ever done that? Right? So I do think there's an opportunity as well for us to just show up in a different way in this industry. Any other questions?
Comments?
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you
Thank you,
all.
guys.